I watched my stepsister Maya scream as the acrylic nail ripped clean off her finger, taking a chunk of her natural nail with it. Blood welled up instantly, and she stumbled backward into the registration table at the entrance of the National Youth Design Competition, knocking over a display of programs. The security guard rushed over, but I was already there, my own perfectly intact set of hand-painted acrylics gleaming under the fluorescent lights as I handed her a tissue. "Oh no, Maya," I said softly, making sure the registration staff could hear the concern in my voice. "You really should have gone to a professional. Discount mall kiosks use such cheap adhesive." Her face went white as she clutched her bleeding finger, and I knew she was calculating. The competition started in 45 minutes. The project she'd stolen from my laptop required precise hand painting for the final touches. Work that would take at least 2 hours with steady hands and intact nails. Work she'd watched me practice for months in my previous life. In my first life, I died in this very building. Maya had poisoned my water bottle backstage, and I'd collapsed during my presentation, seizing on the polished marble floor while she stood in the wings, watching with those cold, calculating eyes. She'd gone on to present my designs as her own and won the $50,000 grand prize and a full scholarship to Parsons. Our mother had been so proud, but that was then. This time, I had 9 perfect acrylic nails and one very strategic weak point on Maya's right index finger, courtesy of the loosening solution I'd brushed onto her press-on while she was in the shower this morning. This time, I knew every move she'd make before she made it. "I need to fix this," Maya hissed, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. "Give me your nail glue, now!" I pulled my arm away gently, aware of the security camera overhead. "Maya, I have acrylics. They're professionally applied. I don't have nail glue, you know that." I'd made sure to explain it to her 3 times this week, watching her eyes glaze over with disinterest each time I mentioned the 2-hour application process, the careful curing under UV lights, the special removal requirements. In my previous life, Maya had been obsessed with copying everything about me, my clothes, my hairstyle, my mannerisms. Our mother encouraged it, said it was sweet that Maya looked up to me so much. What I didn't realize until I was dying on that floor, my vision fading as Maya stood over me with my portfolio in her hands, was that she wasn't copying me out of admiration. She was studying me, learning my patterns, preparing to step into my life and take everything I'd built. When I'd woken up 6 months ago, 16 again, and gasping in my childhood bedroom, my first coherent thought had been about nails. In my previous life, I'd kept my nails short and neat for practical work. Maya had copied that, of course. But this time, I'd gone to the most expensive salon in the city, and gotten a full set of custom acrylics, intricate hand-painted designs that took 3 hours to apply and would take just as long to remove safely. I'd posted pictures on Instagram, talked about them constantly, made them part of my new identity. And Maya, predictable as ever, had rushed to copy me. But she'd gone to a cheap mall kiosk because she was too impatient for a real appointment. She'd gotten press-ons. Good ones, admittedly, but still press-ons. And press-ons could be sabotaged. "You have to help me," Maya said, her voice rising toward hysteria. "Mom said you have to help me." There it was, the magic words. Mom said, in my previous life, those words had been law. Mom said share your art supplies. Mom said let Maya borrow your laptop. Mom said give Maya your notes, your ideas, your time. Mom said don't be selfish. Mom said family comes first. I'd followed every rule. I'd been the perfect daughter, and I'd died for it. "Of course I'll help," I said, keeping my voice gentle and concerned. "Let me find a first aid kit for your finger. That looks really painful." By the time I returned with bandages and antiseptics, 17 minutes had passed. Maya's finger had stopped bleeding, but her hands were shaking as she tried to paint the delicate gold leaf details onto her presentation board. My presentation board, with my designs that she'd stolen from the keystroke logger I'd deliberately left uninstalled on my laptop this time. She thought she was being clever, hacking into my computer while I was at my part-time job. She had no idea I'd created an entire fake portfolio just for her, full of designs that looked impressive but had fatal flaws. The building where we held the competition was the Sterling Arts Center, a massive converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and industrial chic lighting. I'd died here at 17 in my first life, and I'd come back at 16 with 6 months to prepare. 6 months to study every detail of that day, to understand exactly how Maya had orchestrated my murder and my professional destruction. In my first life, my real portfolio had been a collection of sustainable fashion designs that incorporated traditional textile techniques from indigenous cultures around the world. I'd spent 2 years researching, traveling on scholarship money I'd earned through essay contests, learning from master craftspeople. My centerpiece was a coat made from recycled materials that told a story through its construction. Every stitch, every fold, every embellishment had meaning. Maya had presented it as her own and won. She'd gone to Parsons, launched a successful design house by 25, and married the son of a textile magnate. I'd learned all this from the Google searches I did immediately after being reborn, sitting in the public library with tears streaming down my face as I read about her perfect life built on my corpse. This time, the portfolio I'd left for her to steal was full of designs that looked innovative but were actually derivative, uncomfortably similar to the work of several prominent designers. I'd been careful about it, not direct plagiarism, but close enough that anyone with expertise would notice the influences. And the judges for this competition included 2 designers whose work I deliberately echoed. But the designs weren't the main event. The main event was the time pressure. My real portfolio, the one I'd registered officially with the competition organizers 3 months ago, was safely locked in my assigned presentation space backstage. It was completely different from anything I'd done in my previous life. This time, I'd focused on adaptive fashion for disabled individuals, incorporating engineering principles I'd learned from online MIT courses and consultations with actual disabled designers I'd connected with through forums. It was personal, innovative, and most importantly, mine. All mine. 10 minutes to final setup. The announcement crackled over the intercom. Maya's hands were still shaking. She'd managed to bandage her finger, but the gold leaf was smudged, uneven. The presentation board looked amateurish. More importantly, she'd spent so much time trying to fix her nail and salvage the painting that she hadn't practiced her presentation speech. In my first life, she'd had my note cards. This time, those note cards described a completely different project. "Maya," I said, touching her shoulder lightly. She flinched. "You're going to do great. I believe in you." The lie tasted like honey on my tongue. I needed to explain how I got here, how I knew what Maya would do, what our mother would say, how every piece would fall into place. I needed to go back to the beginning, not to my death, but to the years of small cruelties that led up to it. Our mother married Maya's father when I was 7 and Maya was 6. My own father had left when I was 3, disappeared with vague promises to stay in touch and child support checks that stopped coming after 6 months. Mom never talked about him, and I learned early not to ask. Richard, Maya's father, was everything my dad hadn't been. Stable, present, wealthy. He worked in finance, something complex with derivatives that I didn't understand. What I did understand was that suddenly we had a big house, new clothes, and a sister. At first, I loved Maya. She was shy and sweet, and I thought we'd be best friends. I braided her hair and let her borrow my toys. I taught her how to draw and showed her my secret spot in the backyard where the best wildflowers grew. Then I started to notice things. My toys would break when Maya borrowed them. My drawings would disappear from my folder and show up in Maya's with her name on them. When I told Mom, she said I was being dramatic. When I told Richard, he said girls Maya's age sometimes had trouble with boundaries. By the time we were in middle school, the pattern was clear. If I joined the art club, Maya joined the art club. If I made a friend, Maya made friends with them, and slowly, subtly turned them against me. If I got an A on a project, Maya would cry to our mother that her B+ was because I hadn't helped her enough and I'd be punished with extra chores or restrictions. Our mother never saw it. Or maybe she did see it and didn't care. Richard provided the lifestyle she'd always wanted, and Maya was his precious daughter. I was the baggage from her first marriage, the reminder that she'd once been poor and struggling. She needed me to be lesser so Maya could be greater. The summer before my junior year of high school, my first junior year before I died, I worked 3 jobs to save money for a fashion design camp at FIT in New York. I babysat, I tutored, I worked retail on weekends. I saved $2,000 over 8 months. 2 weeks before camp, Maya decided she wanted to go too. She'd never shown interest in fashion design before, but suddenly it was her passion, her dream. Our mother took the money from my bank account, a joint account she'd insisted on when I opened it, and paid for both of us to go. At camp, Maya followed me everywhere. She sat next to me in workshops, copied my sketches, laughed at my jokes half a second after everyone else. The instructors thought she was sweet. The other students thought we were close. I smiled and pretended everything was fine because that's what our mother had taught me to do. On the last day of camp, we had to present our final projects. I designed a dress that incorporated hand-embroidered panels telling the story of my grandmother, who'd been a seamstress. Maya presented a dress that was almost identical, except her story was about her grandmother, Richard's mother, who was alive and well and had never touched a sewing machine in her life. The lead instructor pulled me aside afterward and said quietly, "Your sister's work is very similar to yours. In the professional world, that's called plagiarism." I told our mother during the drive home. She slapped me across the face while we were stopped at a red light and told me I was jealous and cruel. That's when I learned that truth didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. What mattered was that our mother had decided on a narrative. Maya was the golden child, talented and deserving, and I was the bitter older sister trying to sabotage her out of jealousy. The poisoning started small. Maya would offer me food or drinks that made me feel nauseous, gave me headaches, made me foggy and slow. Never enough to send me to the hospital, just enough to keep me off balance. I thought it was stress. I thought it was anxiety. I went to the school nurse who referred me to a counselor who suggested I might be developing an eating disorder. In my first life, I never suspected Maya. Not until I was lying on the floor of the Sterling Arts Center, my body convulsing, and I saw her standing over me with my portfolio, Nasan. Until I saw that look in her eyes, triumph, not concern. Not until I heard her tell the paramedics, "She's been so stressed lately, I think she took something." I died in the ambulance. The last thing I heard was our mother crying, asking Maya if she was okay, if she was traumatized. Not asking about me. Never asking about me. When I woke up in my bedroom 6 months before the competition, I thought I was still dying. I was tangled in my sheets, gasping, my heart racing. Then I saw the date on my phone, 6 months earlier. I was 16 again. I should have been confused. I should have questioned my sanity. But the memories of dying were too vivid, too real. And more than that, the memories of everything Maya had done leading up to that moment were suddenly crystalline clear. All the small cruelties I'd dismissed or blamed on myself, all the red flags I'd ignored, all the times our mother had chosen Maya over me. I had 6 months. 6 months to prepare. 6 months to make sure that this time, I was the one who won. The first thing I did was change my passwords and set up 2-factor authentication on everything. The second thing I did was create a fake portfolio on my laptop, one Maya could steal, and start working on my real designs in a password-protected cloud storage she couldn't access. The third thing was the nails. In my previous life, Maya had copied my aesthetic down to the smallest detail because it helped her narrative. She was my younger sister, looking up to me, wanting to be like me. It made her theft seem innocent, flattering even. This time, I needed her to copy something that would hurt her. Acrylics were perfect. They looked impressive on Instagram, attracted attention, signaled dedication to aesthetics. Maya would feel compelled to copy them to maintain the illusion of being my equal. But acrylics required time and commitment, professional application, careful maintenance, proper removal. Maya had never been willing to put in real work for anything. She'd take the shortcut, and shortcuts could be exploited. I spent 3 hours at the salon getting my first set. The technician, a woman named Lisa who'd been doing nails for 20 years, painted tiny constellations on each nail, swirling galaxies in purple and blue and silver. They were works of art, and they cost $300 I'd saved from my tutoring job. I posted pictures immediately. I talked about them constantly. I made sure Maya saw me being careful with them, saw how they elevated my whole aesthetic, saw the compliments I got. Within 2 weeks, Maya showed up at school with press-ons from the mall. They looked decent from a distance, but I knew they wouldn't last. More importantly, I knew they wouldn't hold up to the kind of detailed handwork required for the final touches on a presentation board. The next phase was the portfolio switch. I needed Maya to steal designs that would damage her credibility without being obvious plagiarism. I spent 2 months creating fake designs that were a derivative of prominent designers' work. Close enough to raise questions, different enough to avoid legal action. I documented everything, my research process, my sketches, my iterations. Then I made sure my laptop was available whenever Maya had opportunity. I caught her on the home security camera I'd secretly installed in our shared bathroom. The laptop was on my desk, visible through my bedroom door while I was supposedly in the shower. She'd crept in, plugged in a USB drive, and copied my entire design folder. She had no idea the camera was there. She had no idea the folder she'd copied was fake. My real work lived in the cloud, accessed only through my phone with biometric security. My real designs were radical departures from anything I'd done in my first life. Not fashion as art, but fashion as accessibility. I'd spent months consulting with disabled designers online, learning about their needs and frustrations. I'd taught myself CAD software and basic engineering principles. I'd created garments with hidden magnetic closures for people with limited hand mobility, dresses with sensory-friendly fabrics for people with autism, adaptive formal wear that worked with wheelchairs and prosthetics. It was work I'd never considered in my first life, and it was deeply personal. In my research, I'd connected with a young designer named Alex who had cerebral palsy. She'd told me about going to her high school prom in a dress her mother had modified from a regular pattern, how the modifications had been visible and clumsy, how she'd felt beautiful anyway but wished she hadn't had to choose between dignity and accessibility. I'd designed Alex's dream dress, and I'd built an entire portfolio around that philosophy. Nobody should have to choose between beauty and function, between style and comfort, between fashion and accessibility. The judges for the National Youth Design Competition would include Marcus Chen, a renowned adaptive fashion designer who'd been working in the field for 15 years. In my previous life, he'd been on the panel but had been overshadowed by the other judges' enthusiasm for my sustainable fashion work. This time, I knew he'd be my champion. But first, I had to make sure Maya's stolen designs self-destructed. 3 months before the competition, I entered one of the fake designs into a small online design contest, under Maya's name. It was similar enough to a famous designer's work that someone pointed it out in the comments. I made sure Maya saw the comments. I watched her panic, saw her try to modify the design, saw her realize that all the designs in the folder had similar problems. She confronted me in our shared bathroom 2 months before the competition. "Your designs are shit," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "They're all derivative. If I entered any of them, I'd be laughed out of the competition." I blinked at her, let my eyes fill with tears. "What are you talking about? Those are my designs. How did you—" I broke off, understanding flooding my face. "Did you go through my computer?" She sneered. "You left it open. And you're lucky I checked your work before you embarrassed yourself. You need to start over." "But the competition is in 2 months. I don't have time." "Not my problem." She pushed past me, and I heard her laughing as she walked to her room. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd cornered me, forced me to create new designs under time pressure while she watched and waited to steal again. She had no idea that I'd already registered my real portfolio with the competition organizers. She had no idea that the deadline for changes had passed 2 days ago. For the next 2 months, I did exactly what Maya expected. I appeared to panic. I stayed up late with my laptop visible, sketching frantically. I created a new set of fake designs, these ones even worse than the first batch, clearly rushed and amateur. I made sure Maya could see them. What I actually did was refine my real portfolio, practice my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep, and prepare my final trap, the nails. 1 week before the competition, I went back to Lisa's salon and got a fresh set of acrylics. This time, the designs were even more elaborate. Tiny, hand-painted scenes of disabled individuals in beautiful clothing, each nail a miniature masterpiece. The application took 3.5 hours. Maya showed up at the salon the next day demanding the same design. Lisa, who I'd briefed carefully, told her the design required a full set of properly applied acrylics and would take at least 3 hours plus drying time. Maya lasted 45 minutes before she got impatient and left. She went to the mall kiosk instead and got elaborate press-ons that looked similar from a distance. Perfect. The night before the competition, I snuck into Maya's room while she was showering. Her press-on nails were sitting on her dresser in their plastic case. She'd been taking them off at night because they felt awkward. I carefully applied a thin layer of nail adhesive loosening solution to the underside of each nail, focusing especially on her right index finger. The solution would weaken the adhesive slowly, making the nails unstable under pressure but not obviously damaged. I'd tested it on my own press-ons first, timing exactly how long it would take for the adhesive to weaken enough to cause failure under stress, 12 to 14 hours. The competition started at 9 a.m. Maya would put her nails on around 7 a.m. By the time she needed to do detailed handwork on her presentation board, right around the time she'd be most stressed and pressing hardest, the nail would fail. And now here we were, and everything had gone exactly according to plan. Maya's presentation was scheduled for 10:30 a.m., 30 minutes after mine. I watched from the wings as she walked to the stage, her presentation board. Under her arm, the board looked terrible. The gold leaf was smudged, the text was uneven, and there was a visible bloodstain on one corner where she'd touched it with her injured finger. But worse than the board was Maya herself. She was pale, shaking, clearly in pain. She hadn't had time to practice her presentation. She hadn't had time to memorize the note cards I'd left for her, note cards that described a completely different project than what was on her board. She started speaking, and within 30 seconds, I could see the judges exchanging glances. She was describing sustainable fashion techniques that weren't visible in her designs. She was talking about indigenous textile traditions, while her board showed generic eco-friendly materials. She contradicted herself twice in the first 2 minutes. The lead judge, a stern woman named Patricia Olson, who'd been in the industry for 30 years, held up a hand. "Excuse me, Ms. Reeves, can you explain the discrepancy between your verbal description and your visual presentation?" Maya froze. I'm sorry, These designs," Patricia continued, pulling out a tablet, "are also remarkably similar to several pieces from emerging designers whose work was featured in Vogue last month. Can you speak to your influences?" I'd made sure Patricia would see those designs. I'd submitted them to a Vogue Young Designer showcase 3 months ago, under the names of actual young designers I'd found online and coordinated with. They'd been happy to get the exposure, and I'd been careful to make sure my fake designs were similar enough to raise questions, but different enough to avoid direct plagiarism charges. Maya stammered through the rest of her presentation. By the end, even the sympathetic judges looked uncomfortable. She practically ran off the stage, tears streaming down her face. My presentation was different. I walked onto the stage with my real portfolio, the one I'd registered months ago. My presentation board showed actual disabled individuals modeling my designs, photos I'd taken with permission from the online community I'd built. My centerpiece was a formal gown designed specifically for wheelchair users, with a structured back that prevented bunching, magnetic closures hidden in an elegant design, and fabric that was both beautiful and durable enough for daily use. I spoke about Alex and her prom dress. I spoke about the dozens of disabled designers and fashion enthusiasts I'd consulted with. I spoke about the engineering principles I'd learned and the adaptations I'd made. I spoke about fashion as a human right, about how everyone deserved to feel beautiful, about accessibility as innovation rather than limitation. Marcus Chen, the adaptive fashion designer on the panel, was leaning forward in his seat, his eyes bright with interest. When I finished, he asked 3 detailed technical questions about my magnetic closure system. I answered all of them confidently, pulling out my prototype to demonstrate. Patricia Olson asked about my influences. I cited Marcus's work along with several other adaptive fashion designers. I showed my research documentation, my consultation emails, my iteration process. Everything was original, sourced, and properly credited. The other judges asked about market viability, production costs, and scalability. I had answers for everything. I'd spent 6 months preparing for every possible question. When I walked off the stage, I could hear applause that hadn't been there for any other presenter. Marcus Chen caught up with me backstage. "That was remarkable," he said, shaking my hand. "Truly innovative work. Where did you learn about adaptive fashion?" "From disabled designers," I said simply. "I figured they were the experts on what they needed." He laughed, delighted. "Revolutionary concept. Listen, I have contacts at Parsons and FIT who would love to see your portfolio. Can I give them your information?" "I'd be honored," I said, and I meant it. This was happening. It was really happening. Maya was waiting for me in the bathroom. Her face was blotchy from crying, her injured finger wrapped in a fresh bandage. "You sabotaged me," she hissed. "You put those fake designs on your computer for me to find." "Why were you on my computer?" I asked calmly. She ignored the question. You loosened my nails. You made sure I couldn't finish my board properly. Why would I do that? We're sisters. I want you to succeed. Liar. She grabbed my arm, her nails, the ones that remained, digging into my skin. You've been planning this. You knew I'd... She stopped, realizing what she was about to admit. Knew you'd what? I asked softly. Steal my designs? Break into my computer? Copy my work and present it as your own? Her face went white. I didn't. There are cameras in our house, I said quietly. In the bathroom. I have footage of you copying files from my laptop. I also have my original design files, time-stamped and saved to cloud storage, showing that I created them months before you stole them. And I have documentation of your online searches for similar work, your attempts to find designs you could copy safely. This was a lie. The cameras only showed her entering my room, not what she did there. But she didn't know that, and more importantly, she knew she was guilty. You can't prove anything, she whispered, but her voice shook. I don't have to, I said. The judges already saw the similarities between your work and those Vogue designs. They already noticed the discrepancies in your presentation. And they already saw my original work, properly sourced and documented. You did this to yourself. She slapped me. The crack echoed in the bathroom, and my cheek burned with the impact. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I smiled. Thank you, I said softly. For what? She spat. For showing me exactly who you are. Again. I walked out of the bathroom and I went straight to the security office. I reported the assault and showed them the reddening mark on my face. They reviewed the bathroom camera footage. There were cameras in the public areas, it turned out, just not in our house, and filed an incident report. Maya was called in and given a formal warning. She was told that any further aggressive behavior would result in her disqualification from all future competitions hosted by this organization. The results were announced at 3 p.m. I won first place and the $50,000 prize. Marcus Chen's studio offered me a summer internship. Parsons reached out about early admission with a full scholarship. FIAT invited me to their advanced intensive program. Maya came in 17th out of 20 contestants. She won nothing. Our mother had been in the audience. I'd watched her face during both presentations, proud and eager during Maya's, despite its obvious flaws, and cold and distant during mine. When the results were announced, she stood up and walked out without speaking to me. I found her in the parking lot sitting in the car. She didn't look at me when I got in. You humiliated your sister, she said quietly. I won a competition with my own work, I replied. You sabotaged her. I don't know how, but I know you did. Did you ever ask yourself why Maya's presentation was so similar to those Vogue designs, I asked? Did you wonder why she couldn't explain the techniques she claimed to use? Did it occur to you that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't presenting her own work? Maya doesn't cheat, Mom said flatly. She's a good girl. You've always been jealous of her. There it was, the fundamental truth of our family. Maya could do no wrong. I could do no right. Evidence didn't matter. Truth didn't matter. Our mother had chosen her narrative years ago, and nothing would change it. I'm moving out, I said. She finally looked at me. You're 16. You can't move out. The prize money is $50,000. I can afford first and last month's rent on an apartment. I can afford to emancipate myself if necessary. I can afford a lawyer if you try to stop me. You tear this family apart over a competition? I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. This family was torn apart a long time ago. You just never noticed because you were too busy sacrificing me to make Maya happy. I got out of the car and went back into the building. Marcus Chen was still there, talking with some of the other judges. When he saw me, he waved me over. We need to discuss your internship, he said. And I want to introduce you to some people. The next 3 hours were a blur of handshakes and business cards and photographs. Fashion journalists wanted interviews. Other designers wanted to collaborate. Someone from Teen Vogue asked if I'd be interested in writing about adaptive fashion for young people. By the time I left the building, it was dark. I'd missed 17 calls from my mother and his dads, 12 from Maya. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. I did move out eventually. It took 3 weeks to find an apartment, another 2 weeks to get through the legal paperwork for emancipation. Our mother fought it, but when the judge asked her why she opposed her daughter's independence, she couldn't articulate a reason beyond "it's not right." The judge granted my petition. Richard, Maya's father, was the only one who helped me move. He showed up with his truck and his quiet presence, and he didn't ask questions. As we carried the last box down the stairs, he stopped me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you." "You couldn't have changed her mind," I said, meaning our mother. "I could have tried harder." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. "For emergencies, don't tell your mother." I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "You earned that prize money through your own talent," he said. "This is different. This is from someone who should have been a better father to you." He hugged me, brief and awkward, and then he left. I never told our mother about the money. I put it in a savings account and didn't touch it for years. The internship with Marcus Chen changed my life. I learned adaptive fashion from the ground up, worked with engineers and designers and disabled consultants. I learned about manufacturing and marketing and the business side of fashion. I made connections that would sustain my entire career. At 17, I enrolled at Parsons on a full scholarship. At 18, I launched my first small collection of adaptive formal wear. At 19, I was featured in Vogue. At 20, I opened my own studio. Maya's trajectory went in the opposite direction. After the competition, people started looking more closely at her work. Someone found old posts online where I'd described projects that were suspiciously similar to designs Maya had claimed as her own. Someone else found the Vogue designs and made direct comparisons. The plagiarism accusations started small, but they grew. Maya tried to rebrand, tried to start over with a new aesthetic, but she'd never developed her own voice, her own vision. Everything she made was derivative because she'd never learned how to create, only how to copy. She enrolled at a state school for fashion design but dropped out after a year. She tried working retail but got fired for stealing. She tried social media influencing but couldn't build an authentic following. By the time she was 22, she was living at home, unemployed, and bitter. Our mother enabled all of it. She made excuses for Maya, blamed me for ruining her confidence, insisted that Maya was the victim of jealousy and conspiracy. She never acknowledged that Maya had stolen from me. She never apologized for choosing Maya over me again and again. I stopped trying to have a relationship with them. I changed my number, moved across the country, built a life they weren't part of. It was easier than I expected. Once I stopped hoping they'd change, once I stopped waiting for the apology that would never come, I found peace. The only person from that old life I stayed in contact with was Richard. He divorced our mother when I was 19, finally, after years of watching her toxicity destroy everything good in their family. He remarried a kind woman named Susan, and I went to the wedding. He asked me to walk him down the aisle, and I cried the whole way. At 25, I was featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue for my work in adaptive fashion. The article mentioned my background, the competition that launched my career, the National Youth Design Competition win that had changed everything. Someone tracked down Maya for a comment. She told them I'd sabotaged her, stolen her ideas, destroyed her career before it began. She sounded delusional, bitter, frozen in that moment 6 years earlier when everything fell apart. The journalist fact-checked her claims. They found the documentation of my original designs, the timestamps, the consultation emails. They found the plagiarism accusations against Maya from multiple sources. They found that Maya had been fired from 3 different retail jobs for theft. The article included one line about her. Reeves's estranged stepsister declined to provide evidence for her claims. I felt nothing when I read it. Not triumph, not vindication, not even pity. Just nothing. She'd become irrelevant to my life, and that was the greatest victory of all. But there was one final confrontation I'd been anticipating for years. My mother showed up at my studio when I was 26, a year after the Forbes article. I was working on a collection for New York Fashion Week, and I'd hired a team of disabled models to walk the runway, a first for a major fashion show. The news had generated significant press attention. She looked older, tired. She'd aged badly, stress and bitterness etching deep lines around her mouth and eyes. "I need to talk to you," she said. I didn't invite her in. We stood in the reception area of my studio, surrounded by dress forms and fabric samples and photographs of my work. "Maya is struggling," she said. "She needs help, financial help." "No. She's your sister." "She was never my sister. She was my tormentor, and you enabled it." "That's not fair. I did my best to treat you both equally." I laughed. It came out cold and sharp. "You took my camp money and gave it to her. You ignored her plagiarism and called me jealous. You watched her poison me, literally poison me, and did nothing." Her face went white. "What are you talking about?" "In my first life, Maya poisoned my water bottle before the competition. I died. I came back. I changed everything. And you know what? You didn't notice the difference because you never really saw me at all." She stared at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe dying and being reborn had fractured something fundamental in my psyche. Or maybe I just learned to tell the truth without fear. "I don't know what kind of delusion, get out," I said quietly. "Get out and don't come back. Maya made her choices. You made yours. Now live with them." "You're really going to abandon your family?" "You abandoned me the day you decided Maya was more important than the truth." She left. I never saw her again. Sometimes I wonder about my first life. Did that version of me die permanently, or did she somehow merge with this version when I was reborn? Did she get peace, or is she still screaming silently somewhere, trapped in the memory of betrayal? I don't know. What I do know is that this life, this second chance, has been everything I earned and nothing I was given. I built it from scratch, with knowledge paid for in death and resurrection. I built it with strategy and patience, and the kind of cold calculation that comes from watching your family destroy you and understanding exactly how they did it. My studio employs 40 people now. We make adaptive fashion accessible to people at every price point. We consult with hospitals and care facilities on functional clothing for patients. We work with major retailers to expand their adaptive fashion lines. We've dressed celebrities and ordinary people, and we treat both with the same care and attention. Last year, we launched a scholarship program for disabled designers. Alex, the young woman whose prom dress story inspired my original portfolio, was our first recipient. She's 23 now, brilliant and fierce, and she's designing a collection that will debut at Milan Fashion Week. She asked me once why I focused on adaptive fashion when my original sustainable fashion work had been so strong. I didn't tell her about my first life. I didn't tell her about Maya, or the poisoning, or the death that taught me everything I needed to know about survival. Instead, I told her the truth of this life. Because fashion should be for everyone, I said. And because the most beautiful thing I've ever seen was a young woman at her prom, wearing a dress that made her feel powerful. I wanted to spend my life creating that feeling for other people. She cried and hugged me, and I thought about how different this timeline was from the first. In my original life, I'd been so focused on artistic expression and sustainability, on making fashion that would impress other designers. In this life, I'd learned to make fashion that served people, that solved real problems, that mattered beyond the runway. Death had taught me that legacy isn't about what you create, it's about who you help create themselves. I'm 30 now. My studio is expanding into Europe and Asia. We're launching a line of adaptive children's clothing next year. I'm engaged to a disability rights lawyer named James who treats me like I'm precious and powerful in equal measure, and have the chosen family of designers and models and activists who see me for who I really am. Maya is still living with our mother, still unemployed, still bitter. I know this because Richard tells me, and I can hear the sadness in his voice when he does. He tried to help her, offered her therapy and job training and financial support. She refused all of it, insisting she was the victim of my sabotage, my jealousy, my cruelty. Our mother still maintains that narrative. I hear she tells people I'm successful because I stole Maya's ideas, because I destroyed her confidence, because I was always jealous of her talent. The story has calcified into dogma in their household, and nothing will change it. I used to imagine elaborate revenges. In my first year after Rebirth, I fantasized about public confrontations where I'd expose everything Maya had done, where our mother would finally see the truth and apologize. I dreamed about Maya begging for forgiveness, about our mother crying and admitting she'd been wrong, but reality was better than any revenge fantasy. The truth is that success is the best revenge, and indifference is the final victory. I didn't need to expose Maya. She exposed herself through her own actions. I didn't need to force our mother to see the truth. Her blindness became her punishment as she watched me succeed while Maya failed. The most satisfying revenge is building a life so full and beautiful that your enemies become irrelevant. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing every day. Sometimes late at night, I look at my hands. The acrylics are long gone. I keep my nails short and practical now for work, but I remember that first set, those elaborate designs that took 3 hours to apply. I remember watching Maya copy me and knowing exactly how it would end. That was the moment I understood that the difference between her and me wasn't talent or opportunity or even luck. It was patience. It was the willingness to put in the hours, to do the work, to build something real instead of stealing something fake. She wanted the appearance of success. I wanted actual success. And that difference made all the difference. My sister copied my nail length. After Rebirth, I got acrylics that took hours she didn't have. But more than that, I built a life that took courage she didn't have, integrity she didn't possess, and vision she could never steal. And I won. Completely, permanently, irreversibly won. The epilogue of my story isn't dramatic. There's no final confrontation, no moment where Maya realizes what she lost and breaks down in regret. There's no tearful reconciliation with our mother. Real life isn't that neat. Instead, my victory is quieter and more profound. It's in the email I got last month from a mother whose disabled daughter wore one of my designs to her school dance and felt beautiful for the first time. It's in the industry awards lining my studio walls. It's in the mentorship relationships I've built with young designers who remind me of who I was, underestimated, overlooked, hungry for a chance to prove themselves. It's in the fact that I sleep soundly every night, my conscience clear, my success earned through my own effort and integrity. Meanwhile, Maya lies awake angry and bitter, and our mother lies awake making excuses for her, and both of them are trapped in that moment at the Sterling Arts Center when everything fell apart. I'm free. They're not. And that's the difference between us. I won because I was willing to become someone new. They lost because they insisted on staying exactly who they were. That's the real story behind the nails, behind the competition, behind everything that came after. Not revenge, evolution, not destruction, reconstruction. Not winning by tearing someone else down, but winning by building myself up so high that their attacks couldn't reach me anymore. My sister copied my nail length. I gave her a trap disguised as an aesthetic. And while she was focusing on the surface, on the appearance, on the shortcut, I was building something real underneath. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just becoming so completely, authentically, successfully yourself that the people who tried to destroy you become footnotes in the story of your triumph. And I'm still writing that story. Every day, every design, every person I help feel beautiful and powerful in their own skin. It's all part of the narrative I'm creating. A narrative where I'm not the victim, not the bitter older sister, not the one who got away. I'm the hero, the protagonist, the one who died and came back stronger. And this time, I'm the one who gets the happy ending.